The autumn wind rattled the shutters of the boarding house in Silver Creek, Wyoming, as Eleanor Hayes folded her last petticoat into the worn carpet bag. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the cold seeping through the thin walls, but from the decision she'd made 3 days ago. She was leaving this God-forsaken town, leaving the position she'd held for 6 months as a seamstress, and most importantly, leaving before anyone could see the shame written across her face. She was 24 years old, plain as prairie grass, and utterly alone in the world. Her father had died of consumption 2 years ago, leaving her nothing but debts and a reputation as the daughter of a drunk. She'd come to Silver Creek with hope stitched into every seam of her carefully mended dress, hoping to build something resembling a life. Instead, she'd found herself the subject of vicious gossip after refusing the advances of Mayor Whitmore's son, a spoiled weasel of a man who couldn't accept that a poor seamstress might have standards. The lies he'd spread about her character had poisoned every potential friendship, every opportunity. Even Mrs. Henderson, who owned the boarding house, had given her notice just yesterday. "I can't have that kind of woman under my roof," she'd said, her voice dripping with false piety. "What would people think?" Eleanor had stopped trying to defend herself. No one believed the truth anyway. They never did when a man's word stood against a woman's, especially when that woman had nothing and no one. She fastened the leather straps of her bag, her eyes dry despite the crushing weight in her chest. She'd cried all her tears the first night. Now there was only a hollow determination to get on the morning stage to Cheyenne, where perhaps she could disappear into anonymity and start over again. The floorboards creaked outside her door. Eleanor froze, listening. Mrs. Henderson usually stayed downstairs at this hour, preparing breakfast for the few respectable guests who still boarded here. Eleanor had planned to slip out before dawn, leaving the week's rent on the dresser to avoid any final confrontation. The footsteps stopped outside her room. Then came a knock, firm but not aggressive. "Miss Hayes." The voice was deep, unfamiliar, with a roughness that spoke of years lived outdoors. "I know you're in there. I can hear you moving around." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't recognize the voice. Another man sent to harass her, to make sure she understood she wasn't wanted here. Her fingers tightened on the handle of her bag. "Go away," she called out, proud that her voice didn't shake. "I'm leaving on the morning stage. You can tell whoever sent you that they've won." There was a pause. Then, "Nobody sent me, Mom. I need to talk to you. It's important. I have nothing to say to anyone in this town. I'm not from this town." Another pause. "My name is Jacob Thornton. I own the Thornton Ranch about 20 miles north of here. Mrs. Henderson told me where to find you." Eleanor's brow furrowed. Mrs. Henderson had told this stranger where she was? That made no sense. The woman couldn't wait to be rid of her. "I don't care who you are," Eleanor said, moving toward the door but not opening it. "Please, leave me alone. I'm looking for a wife, Miss Hayes." The words struck her like a physical blow. Eleanor actually took a step backward, nearly tripping over her bag. "What? A wife?" Jacob Thornton repeated, his tone matter-of-fact. "I placed an advertisement in the Denver newspaper 3 months ago. Mrs. Henderson saw it when she visited her sister. She wrote to me about you." Eleanor's mind spun. Mrs. Henderson had written to a stranger about her, the same woman who'd evicted her for being supposedly immoral. None of this made sense. "I don't understand," she said through the door. "I need a wife, Miss Hayes. Someone to help run my household, care for my daughters, be a partner in building something." Mrs. Henderson said, "You're a hard worker, honest and alone in the world." She said, "You're desperate enough to consider an offer like mine." The brutal honesty of it stung, but Eleanor couldn't deny the truth. She was desperate. Desperate enough to have considered answering one of those mail-order bride advertisements herself, though she'd always imagined she'd at least correspond with the man first, learn something about him before committing to such a drastic step. "I have 2 daughters," Jacob continued when she didn't respond. "Sarah is 8, Emma is 5. Their mother died 3 years ago. I've tried to manage on my own, but I'm failing them. They need a woman's care, a mother's touch. I can offer you a home, security, respect. I'm not a wealthy man, but the ranch is profitable. You'd want for nothing." Eleanor pressed her hand against the door, her thoughts racing. This was insane. She didn't know this man. He could be anyone, anything. And yet, What choice did she have? Return to Cheyenne, where she'd already failed once? Try another town where the same pattern would likely repeat itself? Why me? She asked quietly. Mrs. Henderson made it clear. She thinks I'm a woman of questionable character. Why would she recommend me to you? There was a long silence. When Jacob spoke again, his voice was softer. Because she told me the truth about what happened with the mayor's son, about the lies he spread when you rejected him. She said she had to evict you because of public pressure, but that she knows you're a good woman who deserves better than this town has given you. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. Mrs. Henderson had known the truth all along, had believed her. She also told me, Jacob continued, that you're the best seamstress she's ever seen, that you're kind to the children who pass by the shop window, and that you read books in your room at night by candlelight because you're too proud to use the boarding house lamp oil. She said, you're exactly the kind of woman who could make a life out of nothing, which is what I'm offering. A chance to build something real, something that belongs to you. Eleanor's hand went to her throat. She could barely breathe. I don't know you, Mr. Thornton. No, ma'am, you don't. And I don't know you, not really, but I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking you to consider a partnership, a practical arrangement that benefits us both. I need help with my daughters and my home. You need a fresh start. Somewhere you can build a life without the past haunting you. You said daughters, Eleanor whispered, her mind catching on that detail. You have children. They've already lost one mother. What if I'm not what they need? What if I fail them? You won't. The certainty in his voice made her chest tighten. You can't know that. Mrs. Henderson told me how you mended young Timothy Miller's torn coat for free when his mother couldn't afford to pay. How you sat with old Mrs. Crawford when she was sick, reading to her even though she'd been one of the first to spread gossip about you. Actions speak louder than rumors, Miss Hayes. I'm betting on your actions. Eleanor closed her eyes. This was madness. Absolute madness. And yet, wasn't it also an answer to the prayer she'd been too angry to speak? A way out that didn't involve running away in shame, but instead running towards something, even if that something was uncertain. I need to see you, she said suddenly. If you're asking me to marry you, I need to see your face, look you in the eyes. Fair enough. She heard him take a step back from the door. I'll be downstairs in the parlor. Take your time. His footsteps retreated down the hallway. Eleanor stood frozen for a long moment, her hand still on the door handle. Then, with trembling fingers, she unpinned her hair and quickly braided it, securing it in a simple knot at the base of her neck. She pinched her cheeks to bring some color to her pale face and smoothed down her worn brown dress. It was the best she had, though the fabric was thin at the elbows, and the hem had been let down twice already. She looked at herself in the small, cracked mirror above the wash basin. Plain, that's what she saw. Unremarkable brown hair, unremarkable brown eyes, a face too thin, a figure too slight. Why would a rancher want her for a wife when he could surely find someone prettier, younger, more suitable? But he's not asking for pretty, a voice whispered in her mind. He's asking for practical, for someone to work, to mother his children, to build something. You can do that. You're good at making something from nothing. Drawing a deep breath, Eleanor opened her door and made her way downstairs. The boarding house was quiet, the other residents still sleeping. A lamp burned in the parlor, and she could see a figure silhouetted against the window, looking out at the dark street. When he turned at the sound of her footsteps, Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Jacob Thornton was enormous, easily over 6 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed to fill the doorway. He had dark hair that needed cutting, a thick beard that was just beginning to show threads of silver, and eyes so blue they seemed to glow in the lamplight. His hands were huge, scarred and calloused. The hands of a man who worked with them every day. He wore simple ranch clothes, clean but worn, and a hat that he quickly removed when she entered the room. He was, without question, the most intimidating man she'd ever seen, and yet there was something in his eyes, a gentleness that didn't match his rough exterior, that made her pause rather than flee. "Miss Hayes," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Thank you for seeing me." Eleanor swallowed hard. "Mr. Thornton." They stood there for a moment, simply looking at each other. Eleanor knew he was cataloguing her appearance, just as she was cataloguing his. She wondered what he saw. Did she disappoint him? Was she too plain, too small, too obviously worn down by life? "I won't lie to you," Jacob said finally. I'm not an easy man. I'm rough around the edges. Don't have much practice with social graces. My ranch is isolated, the work is hard, and Wyoming winters can be brutal. If you're looking for comfort or romance, you won't find it with me. His honesty was like a slap of cold water, bracing and clarifying. Eleanor lifted her chin slightly. And if I'm looking for safety and purpose, something flickered in those blue eyes. Respect, maybe, that I can offer. I may not be able to promise you happiness, but I can promise you'll never go hungry, never be homeless, and never be disrespected under my roof. You'd have your own room unless or until you decided otherwise. I won't force myself on you. This would be a partnership first, whatever else it might become. Eleanor's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Your daughters, tell me about them. Jacob's expression softened immediately, and Eleanor saw a transformation in his face. The hard edges smoothed, his eyes warmed. Sarah is smart as a whip, stubborn as her mother was. She's trying to be the woman of the house, taking care of her little sister, and it's too much for an 8-year-old to carry. Emma is gentle, quiet. She still cries for her mama sometimes at night. They need someone who can be firm but kind, someone who won't try to replace their mother but will love them for who they are. I've never had children, Eleanor admitted. I don't know if I'd be a good mother. Do you like children? Yes. The answer came without hesitation. Very much. Are you patient? I am. Can you cook? Clean, sew? All of it. I'm a hard worker, Mr. Thornton. I may not be much to look at, but I earn my keep. Jacob frowned, a deep crease forming between his brows. You're plenty to look at, Miss Hayes. Don't sell yourself short. The unexpected compliment made heat flood Eleanor's cheeks. She looked down at her hands, unsure how to respond. I have a proposal, Jacob said after a moment. Come back to the ranch with me today. Stay for 2 weeks. Get to know the girls, see the place, decide if you can make a life there. If at the end of 2 weeks you want to leave, I'll personally escort you to wherever you want to go and give you enough money to start fresh somewhere. No obligation, no strings attached. Eleanor looked up sharply. Why would you do that? Because this decision affects the rest of your life and my daughters' lives. It shouldn't be made in desperation, in the dark hours of the morning when you're running from something. You should choose this, if you choose it, with clear eyes and a full understanding of what you're accepting. The kindness of it, the sheer decency, made Eleanor's throat tighten. When was the last time anyone had offered her a choice? When had anyone cared whether she was making a decision out of hope or desperation? And if I decide to stay? She asked quietly. What then? Then we'd marry, simple ceremony in front of the ranch hands to make it legal. You'd become Sarah and Emma's mother, my wife, the lady of Thornton Ranch. We'd build a life together, one day at a time. Eleanor's mind was spinning. This morning, she'd been packing to run away to nothing. Now she was being offered a home, a family, a purpose. It seemed too good to be true, and yet Jacob Thornton's eyes held nothing but sincerity. I need to think, she whispered. Of course. Jacob settled his hat back on his head. I'll be at the livery stable preparing the wagon. If you decide to come, meet me there within the hour. If you don't come, I'll understand and wish you well wherever your path leads. He moved toward the door, his footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. Eleanor watched him go, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and fears and impossible hopes. Mr. Thornton, she called out just as he reached the door. He turned, waiting. Why haven't you remarried before now? Surely in 3 years you could have found someone local, someone the girls already know. Jacob's expression grew distant, sad. I tried. After Anne died, I courted the schoolteacher in Clearwater, thinking Sarah and Emma already knew her from church. She seemed kind enough. He paused, his jaw tightening. But she wasn't interested in 2 grief-stricken little girls who cried for their mama. She wanted me to send them away to boarding school, said it would be better for everyone. I ended things that same night. You chose your daughters over your own happiness. They are my happiness, Miss Hayes. They're also my responsibility. Any woman who comes into our lives needs to understand that those girls come first, always. With that he left, closing the door quietly behind him. Eleanor stood in the empty parlor, her heart racing, her mind clearer than it had been in months. She thought about boarding the stage to Cheyenne, returning to a city where she'd failed once before, where she'd have to start over completely alone. She thought about years of working her fingers raw in some factory or shop, living in rented rooms, always one disaster away from destitution. Then she thought about two little girls who'd lost their mother, about a man rough enough to survive the Wyoming frontier, but gentle enough to put his children's needs before his own, about a ranch that could be a home, a place where her work would matter, where she could build something lasting. It wasn't the romantic fairy tale she dreamed of as a girl, but it was real, it was solid, and it was more than she dared to hope for in a very long time. Eleanor climbed the stairs to her room, her decision crystallizing with each step. She added the few remaining items to her carpet bag, including the small wooden box that held her mother's wedding ring and her father's pocket watch, the only family heirlooms she possessed. She left the rent money on the dresser as planned, along with a brief note thanking Mrs. Henderson for her unexpected kindness. Then, with her bag in hand, and her heart hammering with equal parts fear and hope, Eleanor Hayes walked through the pre-dawn streets of Silver Creek toward the livery stable. Jacob was loading supplies into a sturdy wagon when she arrived. He looked up at the sound of her footsteps, and something in his expression eased, though he didn't smile. "Miss Hayes, Mr. Thornton." She set her bag down, meeting his eyes directly. "I'd like to accept your offer, 2 weeks at the ranch, to see if this arrangement could work." He nodded slowly, then reached for her bag. "I promise you won't regret giving us a chance." "I hope not," she said quietly. Jacob secured her bag in the wagon, then turned and offered his hand to help her up to the seat. Eleanor hesitated only a moment before placing her small hand in his massive one. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid, and he lifted her into the wagon seat with such ease she might have weighed nothing at all. He climbed up beside her, taking up the reins. The wagon seat seemed to shrink with him on it, his broad shoulders nearly touching hers, despite her attempt to make herself small in the corner. "It's about a 4-hour ride," he said, guiding the horses out of the stable yard. "We'll stop halfway to rest the horses and eat the breakfast Mrs. Henderson packed for us." Eleanor nodded, pulling her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders as the cold morning air hit her. She immediately regretted the gesture when Jacob noticed. "You don't have a proper coat," he observed, his voice concerned rather than critical. "I sold it last month to pay for medicine when I had the cough," Eleanor admitted. "The shawl is sufficient." Without a word, Jacob reached behind the seat and pulled out a heavy wool blanket. He draped it over her lap, tucking it around her shoulders with surprising gentleness for such large hands. "Can't have you catching your death before you even see the ranch," he murmured. The kindness of the gesture made Eleanor's eyes sting. She blinked rapidly, staring out at the road ahead as Silver Creek disappeared behind them. She was leaving behind the only life she'd known, heading into complete uncertainty with a stranger who'd promised her nothing but honesty and a chance. Strangely, it felt less like running away and more like running towards something. Maybe, just maybe, toward home. The sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky with streaks of gold and pink when they left the last buildings of Silver Creek behind. Eleanor watched the landscape transform from the rough streets and weathered storefronts to open prairie, the vast Wyoming territory stretching endlessly in all directions. Jacob Thornton drove in silence, his attention on the road and the horses. Eleanor studied him from the corner of her eye, trying to reconcile the intimidating size of him with the gentle way he'd tucked the blanket around her. His hands on the reins were confident, practiced, and she noticed scars crisscrossing his knuckles, evidence of years of hard labor. "You're staring," he said without looking at her, though his tone held no accusation. Eleanor felt heat flood her cheeks. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be rude." "Not rude. Natural, I suppose, when you're traveling with a stranger." He glanced at her briefly, those blue eyes sharp and assessing. "You have questions. Ask them." Eleanor pulled the blanket tighter, gathering her courage. "How did your wife die, if it's not too painful to speak of?" Jacob's jaw tightened, but he answered. "Fever took her. Started with Emma, spread through the whole house. Sarah and I got sick but recovered. Anne didn't. She fought for 2 weeks, but in the end her body just gave out." His voice was flat, carefully controlled. "I couldn't save her. Had to watch her slip away while I was too weak to even stand at her bedside." The pain in those words, despite their measured delivery, made Eleanor's chest ache. "I'm so sorry. It was 3 years ago. I've made my peace with it mostly. But the girls, they're still healing. Sarah barely remembers her mother now, which breaks my heart in a different way. And Emma, she has nightmares sometimes, crying for her mama. What was she like, your wife?" Jacob was quiet for so long, Eleanor thought he wouldn't answer. "Then she was strong, came west with her family when she was 16, never complained about the hardships. We met at a barn dance, married 6 months later. She gave me 2 beautiful daughters and 10 good years before God took her home." He paused. "She was a good woman, a good mother. But I won't lie and say our marriage was some grand romance. We were partners, friends. We built a life together. That's what I'm offering you, Miss Hayes. Not poetry and passion, but something real and lasting." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I understand, and I appreciate your honesty." "What about you?" Jacob asked, surprising her. "Mrs. Henderson mentioned your father passed. What about your mother?" "She died when I was 12. Cholera epidemic that swept through our town. My father never really recovered from losing her. He started drinking, couldn't hold down work. We moved from place to place, him chasing jobs that never lasted. When he died 2 years ago, I was left with nothing but his debts." Eleanor stared out at the prairie, remembering. "I've been on my own since then, moving from town to town, taking whatever work I could find." "That's a hard life for a young woman alone." "It is." Eleanor's voice was quiet but steady. "Which is why I'm here, Mr. Thornton. I'm tired of running, tired of barely surviving. I want something more, something stable, even if it means marrying a stranger and becoming a mother to children I've never met." Jacob nodded, seeming to understand. "I respect that. It takes courage to admit what you need and to reach for it, even when it's uncertain." They fell into a companionable silence after that. The only sounds, the creaking of the wagon wheels and the steady clip-clop of the horse's hooves. Eleanor found herself relaxing slightly, the tension in her shoulders easing. Jacob Thornton might be intimidating in size and appearance, but there was a steadiness to him that was oddly comforting. As the sun climbed higher, warming the crisp autumn air, the landscape began to change. The flat prairie gave way to gentle rolling hills, and in the distance, Eleanor could see mountains rising purple and majestic against the blue sky. "That's the Medicine Bow Range," Jacob said, noticing her gaze. "The ranch sits at the base of those foothills. Good grazing land, protected from the worst of the winter winds." "It's beautiful," Eleanor murmured, genuinely awed by the vast, untamed beauty of the landscape. "It's home," Jacob said simply. After another hour of travel, Jacob pulled the wagon off the road near a small creek lined with cottonwood trees. "We'll rest here, let the horses drink, and graze a bit." He climbed down first, then turned to help Eleanor. His hands spanned her waist as he lifted her down, and Eleanor was acutely aware of his strength, the way he set her on her feet with such care, as if she were something fragile and precious. "Thank you," she managed, stepping back quickly. Jacob retrieved a basket from the wagon bed. "Mrs. Henderson packed enough food to feed an army. Come sit in the shade." They settled on a fallen log by the creek, and Jacob opened the basket to reveal fresh bread, cheese, apples, and a jar of honey. Eleanor's stomach growled audibly, and she pressed a hand to it, embarrassed. "When did you last eat a proper meal?" Jacob asked, his tone more concerned than judgmental. "Yesterday morning," Eleanor admitted. "I've been saving my money for the stage fare." Jacob's expression darkened. "You were going hungry so you could leave. It was only for a few days." "I'm fine. You're too thin," he said bluntly, cutting a thick slice of bread and slathering it with honey before handing it to her. "Eat. That's an order, not a request." Eleanor took the bread, her pride warring with her hunger. Hunger won. She bit into the bread, the sweetness of the honey exploding on her tongue. She closed her eyes, savoring it. When she opened them, Jacob was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing. Just makes me glad to see you eat. You'll have 3 square meals a day at the ranch. More if you want it. No one goes hungry under my roof." They ate in silence, Eleanor forcing herself not to devour the food too quickly, despite her ravenous appetite. Jacob ate methodically, his attention divided between the meal and the surrounding landscape, always watchful. "Do you worry about danger out here?" Eleanor asked, noticing his vigilance. "Old habits," Jacob said. "Spent time in the army before I settled down to ranching. Territory's safer now than it used to be, but it pays to stay alert. You were a soldier, 3 years, saw more death and destruction than any man should." He stared out at the creek, his eyes distant. "That's where I got most of these." He held up his scarred hands, battle wounds mostly healed now. Eleanor studied those hands, imagining the pain behind each scar. "The war changed you, changes every man who lives through it. I came home looking for peace, for a quiet life. Found it with Anne for a while. Then she died, and I realized peace is something you have to keep fighting for, in different ways." Eleanor understood that more than he knew. Fighting to build something instead of destroy it. Exactly. Jacob looked at her, really looked at her, and Eleanor felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. "You're not what I expected, Miss Hayes." What did you expect? Someone more, I don't know, desperate maybe, willing to say anything to secure a place, but you're honest, direct. I appreciate that. "I don't see the point in pretending to be something I'm not," Eleanor said. "You'd discover the truth eventually anyway. Most people don't think that far ahead. They just want to get what they need in the moment." Jacob stood, brushing crumbs from his pants. "We should get moving. The girls will be waiting." Eleanor's stomach fluttered with nerves. The girls. She was about to meet the 2 children who could potentially become her daughters. What if they hated her? What if she didn't know how to talk to them, how to win their trust? As if reading her thoughts, Jacob said, "Don't worry too much about Sarah and Emma. They're good kids, just hurt and lonely. Show them kindness and they'll come around." "What if I'm not enough?" Eleanor voiced her deepest fear. "What if they need more than I can give?" Jacob paused, his hand on the wagon wheel. Then he turned to face her fully. "Miss Hayes, Eleanor, may I call you Eleanor?" She nodded, too surprised to speak. "Eleanor, those girls have been making do with a father who's doing his best, but failing in all the ways that matter. I can teach them to ride and rope, to work hard and stay safe, but I can't teach them to be women, can't help them with the things their mother would have shown them. I can't braid hair, or mend dresses properly, or explain the things that will happen to their bodies as they grow. I can't give them the softness they need to balance the hard edges of this life." His voice grew rough with emotion. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to care to try. That's already more than they have now." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes at the raw honesty in his words. This man, this intimidating giant of a man, was admitting his failures, his fears, laying them bare for her to see. "I'll do my best," she promised. "That's all I can offer, but I'll give them everything I have. That's all I'm asking." Jacob helped her back into the wagon, his touch gentle despite his size. "Now, let's get you home and introduce you to the family." Home. The word settled into Eleanor's chest with a warmth that surprised her. She wasn't even sure she believed it yet, but she wanted to. Oh, how she wanted to. The last 2 hours of the journey passed more quickly than the first. Jacob pointed out landmarks along the way, the property line of his ranch, the pastures where cattle grazed, the line shack where the hands stayed during calving season. Eleanor listened, absorbing every detail, trying to picture herself as part of this world. When they finally crested a rise and the ranch came into view, Eleanor caught her breath. It wasn't grand or fancy, nothing like the estate houses she'd seen in picture books, but it was solid, real, nestled against the foothills with mountains rising behind it like protective sentinels. The main house was a 2-story structure of weathered wood with a wide porch wrapping around the front. There was a barn, a corral, several outbuildings, and beyond it all, stretching to the horizon, land that belonged to the man sitting beside her. "It's not much," Jacob said, misreading her silence, "but it's sturdy, and there's room to grow." "It's wonderful," Eleanor breathed, and she meant it. This was a place where roots could go deep, where a person could build a life that meant something. As they drew closer, Eleanor spotted 2 small figures on the porch, the girls, Sarah and Emma, watching their father return, unaware that he'd brought someone who might change their lives forever. Jacob pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. "Girls, come say hello." The older girl, Sarah, came forward cautiously, her hand holding tight to her younger sister's. She had her father's dark hair, but lighter eyes, somewhere between blue and grey. Emma peeked out from behind Sarah, tiny and blonde, with eyes that were red-rimmed, as if she'd been crying recently. "Sarah, Emma, this is Miss Eleanor Hayes," Jacob said, climbing down from the wagon. "She's going to be staying with us for a while." Sarah's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Why?" "Because your father invited me," Eleanor answered before Jacob could. Climbing down from the wagon, without waiting for help, she crouched down to be at eye level with the girls, ignoring the way her knees protested the movement. "It's nice to meet you both. Your father has told me so much about you." "Are you going to be our new mama?" Emma asked in a tiny voice. Eleanor's heart clenched. Well, that depends on a lot of things. Right now, I'm just here to visit, to get to know you." "We don't need a new mama," Sarah said, her chin lifting defiantly. "We have each other, and we have Pa." "Sarah," Jacob's voice held a warning note, but Eleanor shook her head. "It's all right. She's allowed to feel however she feels." She looked directly at Sarah, respecting the girl's protective stance. "You're right. You don't need a new mama. No one could ever replace the mother you lost. But maybe, if we get to know each other, we could be friends. And friends help each other, don't they?" Sarah studied Eleanor with eyes far too old for 8 years. Finally, she shrugged. "I guess. That's a start," Eleanor said with a gentle smile. She stood, looking at Jacob. "May I see the house?" "Of course." Jacob gestured toward the door. "Girls, help Miss Hayes with her bag." Sarah grudgingly picked up Eleanor's carpet bag, her small arms straining with the weight. Eleanor almost took it back, but something in the girl's expression stopped her. This was a test. Sarah was measuring her, seeing if Eleanor would coddle her or treat her like the capable person she was trying to be. "Thank you, Sarah," Eleanor said simply. "That's very helpful." The girl's expression shifted slightly, surprise flickering in her eyes before she masked it with indifference. Inside, the house was clean but sparse, functional rather than comfortable. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large table, a cast-iron stove, and a few chairs arranged near a stone fireplace. A narrow staircase led to the second floor. "Sarah and Emma share a room upstairs," Jacob explained. "There's a spare room next to mine that would be yours. It's not fancy, but it has a bed and a dresser." Eleanor set down her bag, taking in her surroundings. The house needed a woman's touch, desperately. The curtains were thin and faded. There were no rugs on the floor, no pictures on the walls. It was a house, not a home. But she could change that. If she stayed, she could make this place warm and welcoming, could turn these stark walls into something that felt like family. "It's perfect," she said honestly. Jacob looked skeptical. "You don't have to lie to spare my feelings." "I'm not lying. It's a good house with strong bones. It just needs some care, some attention to detail." Eleanor turned to the girls, who were watching her warily. "What would you girls like for supper? I could make something special for your father's return." Sarah's suspicion deepened. "You can cook?" "I can. I'm actually quite good at it, if I do say so myself. Pa usually just makes stew or beans," Emma offered quietly. "Well then, let's see what we can find in the pantry and make something a bit more interesting, shall we?" Eleanor moved toward the kitchen area, rolling up her sleeves. She spent the next hour exploring Jacob's meager supplies and creating something resembling a proper meal. The girls watched from a distance at first, but gradually Emma crept closer, drawn by curiosity. "What's that?" the little girl asked, pointing at the dough Eleanor was kneading. "This is going to be bread. Would you like to help me shape it?" Emma's eyes lit up, but she looked to her sister for permission. Sarah shrugged, trying to appear indifferent, but Eleanor noticed the way her gaze lingered on the dough. "There's enough for both of you to help if you'd like," Eleanor said casually, not pushing. Emma immediately came forward, her small hands reaching for the dough. Sarah held back for another moment before joining them, her movements stiff and reluctant. Eleanor showed them how to shape the dough into rolls, her hands guiding theirs gently. As they worked together, she asked them simple questions about the ranch, about their favorite things to do, careful not to pry too deep too fast. "I like the horses," Emma said shyly, "especially Buttercup. She's gentle. I can ride faster than most of Pa's ranch hands," Sarah boasted, then seemed to catch herself, as if she'd revealed too much. "That's impressive," Eleanor said sincerely. "I've never learned to ride properly. Maybe you could teach me sometime." Sarah looked startled. "Really? You'd want me to teach you? If you're as good as you say, then yes, absolutely. I'd be honored to learn from you." Something in Sarah's posture softened, just a fraction. Eleanor counted it as a victory. By the time Jacob returned from settling the horses, the kitchen was filled with the smell of fresh bread, roasted chicken and vegetables. The table was set with mismatched plates Eleanor had found in the cupboard, and the girls were washing their hands at the pump. Jacob stopped in the doorway, his eyes widening. You made all this? The girls helped, Eleanor said, giving Sarah and Emma credit. They were wonderful assistants. Emma beamed. Even Sarah couldn't quite hide a small smile. They sat down to eat together, and Eleanor watched the family dynamic carefully. Jacob was gentle with his daughters, but clearly out of his depth when it came to the small things, like reminding Emma to use her napkin or noticing that Sarah was pushing her vegetables around her plate instead of eating them. "Sarah, the vegetables are good for you," Eleanor said quietly. "Just a few bites." Sarah's eyes flashed with defiance, but before she could argue, Jacob said, "Listen to Miss Hayes, Sarah." The girl ate her vegetables with exaggerated reluctance, and Eleanor hid a smile. It was a small battle, but an important one. Boundaries and care went hand in hand. After supper, as Eleanor cleared the dishes, Emma tugged on her skirt. "Will you read us a story before bed? Pa tries, but he always falls asleep." "Hey," Jacob protested, but there was no real heat in it. "That's only happened twice." "3 times, Sarah corrected. Eleanor laughed, the sound surprising even herself. When was the last time she'd laughed? "I'd be happy to read to you. Do you have a favorite book?" Emma ran to retrieve a worn copy of Grimm's fairy tales, and soon all 4 of them were settled in the living area, the girls on the floor near the fireplace, Jacob in his chair, and Eleanor perched on the edge of the sofa with the book in her lap. She read to them for an hour, doing different voices for the characters, making the girls giggle, and Jacob smiled despite himself. When Emma's eyes started to droop, Eleanor closed the book. "Time for bed, I think." "I'll take them up," Jacob said, standing. "Girls, say good night to Miss Hayes." "Good night," Emma said sleepily, then surprised Eleanor by giving her a quick hug before running to her father. Sarah hesitated, then offered a small, "Good night, Miss Hayes." "Good night, Sarah. Sleep well." After Jacob had taken the girls upstairs, Eleanor finished cleaning the kitchen, her mind whirling with thoughts and emotions. This had been, by far, one of the strangest days of her life. This morning she'd been preparing to run away to nothing. Tonight she was in a ranch house in the Wyoming wilderness, reading bedtime stories to 2 little girls who might become her daughters. She heard Jacob's heavy footsteps on the stairs and turned to find him standing in the doorway, watching her. "You didn't have to do all this," he said, gesturing to the spotless kitchen. "I know, I wanted to." Jacob moved closer, and Eleanor was once again struck by his sheer size. In the small kitchen, he seemed to fill all the available space. "The girls liked you. That's more than I hoped for on the first day. They're testing me," Eleanor said honestly, "seeing if I'll stay or leave like I imagine others have." "No one else has been here," Jacob corrected. "I haven't brought anyone around them since their mother died. You're the first." The weight of that confession settled between them. Eleanor was the first woman he'd allowed into his daughters' lives in 3 years. The responsibility of that felt enormous. "I should show you to your room," Jacob said, breaking the charged silence. "You must be exhausted." He led her upstairs, pointing out which doors led to which rooms. The spare room he'd mentioned was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the ranch lands. "There's water in the pitcher for washing," Jacob said, lingering in the doorway, "and extra blankets in the chest if you get cold. It can get chilly up here at night." "Thank you," Eleanor set her bag on the bed, "for everything, for giving me this chance." Jacob nodded, his hand on the doorframe. "Thank you for taking it. I know this isn't easy, coming to a strange place with people you don't know." "Nothing worth having is easy," Eleanor said softly. Something flickered in Jacob's eyes, an emotion Eleanor couldn't quite name. "No, I suppose not." "Well, good night, Eleanor. I'll be just down the hall if you need anything." "Good night, Jacob." He left, pulling the door closed behind him. Eleanor stood in the center of her new room, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the house settling, the wind in the eaves, the distant lowing of cattle. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her dresses in the small wardrobe, placing her mother's ring and her father's watch on the dresser where she could see them. Then she changed into her nightgown and crawled into bed, her body aching with exhaustion. As she drifted towards sleep, she thought about the day, about Jacob's rough kindness and the girl's cautious acceptance. She thought about the possibility of this strange arrangement working, of finding a place where she belonged. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Eleanor Hayes went to sleep with something that felt dangerously close to hope. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Eleanor fell into a routine of cooking, cleaning, and caring for the girls, while Jacob managed the ranch. Each day brought small victories and minor setbacks. Sarah remained guarded, but slowly began to warm to Eleanor, especially after Eleanor started teaching her to sew, turning it into a practical skill rather than a frivolous feminine pursuit. Emma attached herself to Eleanor almost immediately, following her around the house, helping with chores, and talking about her mother in quiet, wistful tones that broke Eleanor's heart. Eleanor learned to bake bread the way the girls liked it, discovered that Sarah had nightmares about her mother's death that she refused to talk about, and that Emma sucked her thumb when she was scared. She learned that Jacob woke before dawn every day, that he was patient with his daughters, but hard on himself, and that he carried the weight of his wife's death like a physical burden. She also learned that Jacob Thornton was a man of few words, but many small kindnesses. He noticed when she was tired and sent her to rest while he watched the girls. He brought in extra firewood so she wouldn't have to carry it. He complimented her cooking, her way with the girls, her improvements to the house. And Eleanor found herself noticing things about him too. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, which was rare but devastating when it happened. The gentleness of his hands when he helped Emma with her coat. The quiet competence with which he ran the ranch, earning the respect of his men through fairness and hard work rather than fear. On the 13th day of her visit, Eleanor was in the kitchen kneading dough when Jacob came in from the barn, his face troubled. "There's a storm coming," he said without preamble. "A big one, if I'm reading the signs right. Could be snowed in for a few days." Eleanor's hands stilled in the dough. "When? Tomorrow? Maybe the day after. I wanted to give you warning. If you want to leave, to get back to town before it hits, I'll take you today." Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment of decision. Her 2 weeks were almost up anyway. If she left now, she could make it to Cheyenne, start the life she'd planned before Jacob Thornton had appeared at her door. But as she looked around the kitchen, at the curtains she'd sewn and hung, at the girls' drawings pinned to the wall, at Jacob standing in the doorway with something like fear in his eyes, Eleanor realized she'd already made her choice. She'd made it days ago, maybe even that first morning when she'd walked into the livery stable instead of boarding the stage. "I'm not leaving," she said quietly. Jacob's expression shifted, hope and relief warring with caution. "You're sure? Once the storm hits, you'll be stuck here until spring, most likely. The roads become impassable." "I'm sure." Eleanor met his eyes directly. "I've seen enough, Jacob. I want to stay, if you'll still have me." Jacob crossed the kitchen in 3 long strides, stopping just short of touching her. Eleanor, I've been terrified you'd leave. These past 2 weeks, watching you with the girls, seeing you make this house a home, I've been praying you'd choose to stay." "Then I guess we should make this official," Eleanor said, her voice shaking slightly. "Unless you've changed your mind." "Never!" Jacob reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her flour-dusted hands in his. "Marry me, Eleanor Hayes. Be my wife, mother to my daughters, partner in building this life. I can't promise you'll always be happy, but I swear I'll do everything in my power to make sure you never regret this choice." Eleanor looked down at their joined hands, his so large and scarred, hers small and pale. They shouldn't fit together, shouldn't make sense, but somehow they did. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Jacob's relief was palpable. He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you," he said roughly. "Thank you for taking a chance on us." Before Eleanor could respond, the kitchen door burst open and Emma ran in, Sarah right behind her. Pa, we saw a hawk carrying a snake," Emma announced excitedly. Then both girls stopped, noticing their father holding Eleanor's hands, the intimate way they were standing. "What's happening?" Sarah asked suspiciously. Jacob looked at Eleanor, raising an eyebrow in question. She nodded. "Girls, Miss Hayes has agreed to stay with us permanently. We're going to be married, which means she'll become your stepmother." Emma's face lit up like the sun breaking through clouds. "Really? You're staying forever?" "Forever," Eleanor confirmed, kneeling down to be at their level. If that's all right with you both. Emma launched herself into Eleanor's arms, nearly knocking her over. Yes! Yes, yes! Sarah stood apart, her expression unreadable. Eleanor gently extricated herself from Emma and approached the older girl carefully. Sarah, I know this is a big change, and I know I can never replace your mother, but I hope in time we can build our own relationship, whatever that looks like. You get to decide what you call me, how close you want to be. There's no pressure. Sarah studied her for a long moment. Then, in a voice that was trying very hard to sound indifferent but didn't quite succeed, she said, I guess it'll be nice to have help with Emma. She can be a lot sometimes. Eleanor smiled. I think you're both wonderful, and I'm honored to be part of your family. Can we have a party? Emma asked, bouncing on her toes. When you get married? Jacob laughed, a deep, warm sound that Eleanor was learning to treasure. We'll see, sweetheart. First, we need to actually have the ceremony. That evening, after the girls were in bed, Jacob and Eleanor sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. The air was crisp, smelling of coming snow. I'll ride into town tomorrow morning, Jacob said. Talk to the preacher, file the marriage license. We can do the ceremony the day after before the storm hits. Simple, just us and the ranch hands as witnesses. Eleanor nodded. That sounds perfect. Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then, I know we agreed this would be a practical arrangement, a partnership, and I meant what I said about not forcing myself on you. You'll have your own room for as long as you want it. But Eleanor, I want you to know I'm hoping this becomes more than just a business agreement. In time, if you're willing. Eleanor's heart fluttered. She turned to look at him, this giant of a man who'd shown her nothing but kindness and respect. I'd like that too, she admitted softly. I'm not expecting romance or passion, but partnership can grow into something deeper, can't it? With time and care? It can, Jacob agreed. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his intention, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were rough but gentle, and Eleanor found herself leaning into the touch. You're beautiful, Jacob murmured, his voice low and rough. I should have said that before. I know you don't think you are, but you are, especially when you smile. Eleanor felt heat flood her cheeks. You don't have to say things like that. I'm not saying it because I have to. I'm saying it because it's true. Jacob's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. These past 2 weeks, watching you with the girls, seeing you bring life back to this house, you've become more beautiful every day. Eleanor didn't know what to say to that, so she simply leaned against his shoulder, letting her head rest against his solid warmth. Jacob's arm came around her, holding her carefully, as if she was something precious. They sat like that until the last light faded from the sky, and Eleanor thought that maybe, just maybe, this partnership could become something truly special. The wedding took place 2 days later in the ranch house parlor, with the windows rattling from the approaching storm. The preacher from the nearest church had ridden out that morning, and the ranch hands had crowded into the small space, their hats in their hands, witnessing their boss take a bride. Eleanor wore her best dress, the grey one with the black trim, and Jacob had surprised her that morning with a small bouquet of wildflowers he must have picked before dawn. Sarah and Emma stood beside her, Emma clutching her hand tightly, Sarah trying to look grown-up and composed, but failing to hide her excitement. The ceremony was brief and simple. Jacob spoke his vows in a clear, steady voice, his blue eyes never leaving Eleanor's face. When it was her turn, Eleanor's voice shook slightly, but she meant every word. I, Eleanor Hayes, take you, Jacob Thornton, to be my husband. I promise to be your partner, to care for your daughters as my own, to build a life with you based on honesty and respect. I promise to try my best every day to make this home a place of warmth and love. The preacher pronounced them man and wife, and Jacob leaned down to press a gentle, chaste kiss to Eleanor's lips. It was brief, respectful, but Eleanor felt it all the way to her toes. The ranch hands cheered, Emma clapped her hands in delight, and even Sarah smiled. They celebrated with a simple meal Eleanor had prepared, the men teasing their boss good-naturedly about being caught in the marriage trap, Jacob taking it all with good humor. As the storm began in earnest that evening, snow falling thick and fast outside the windows, the ranch hands retreated to the bunkhouse, and Eleanor found herself alone with her new family. Girls, bedtime, Jacob said, noting the late hour. But it's a special day, Emma protested, which means you need your sleep. so you can enjoy tomorrow too. Jacob scooped Emma up, making her giggle. Say goodnight to Eleanor. Both girls hugged Eleanor. Emma enthusiastically, Sarah with more reservation but genuine warmth. As Jacob carried Emma upstairs, Sarah lingering to walk beside him, Eleanor cleaned up the remnants of the celebration, her wedding ring, a simple gold band that had belonged to Jacob's grandmother, catching the lamplight. She was married to a man she'd known for only 2 weeks. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt a strange sense of rightness, as if all the painful, meandering paths of her life had been leading her here, to this moment, to this family. Jacob returned 20 minutes later, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. He found Eleanor banking the fire in the stove, preparing the house for the night. They wanted you to come say goodnight, he said, but I told them you'd check on them tomorrow morning. Eleanor nodded, suddenly nervous. This was their wedding night. In traditional marriages, there would be expectations, obligations, but Jacob had promised her time, space, the right to set the pace of their physical relationship. As if reading her thoughts, Jacob said, I meant what I said, Eleanor. Your room is yours. There's no expectation, no pressure. I know. Eleanor turned to face him. But we are married now, and I think we should at least talk about what comes next. Jacob moved closer, and Eleanor had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. He was so tall, so broad, and yet she'd never felt threatened by his size. If anything, she felt protected by it. What do you want to come next? Jacob asked softly. Eleanor took a breath, gathering her courage. I want this to be a real marriage, Jacob, not just a business arrangement. I want to build something true with you, with the girls. But I don't have experience with the physical aspects of marriage. Jacob's eyes widened slightly. You've never been with a man? Eleanor shook her head, heat flooding her face. I know that probably makes me less desirable, less experienced than you might want, but I thought you should know. Less desirable? Jacob's voice was rough with some emotion Eleanor couldn't identify. Eleanor, knowing that you're trusting me with that, it's an honor and a responsibility I don't take lightly. He reached out, cupping her face in his large, calloused hands. We'll take this as slow as you need. There's no rush, no deadline. We have the rest of our lives to figure this out together. Eleanor leaned into his touch. I'm not asking to wait forever. I'm just asking for patience while we learn each other. I can give you patience, Jacob murmured, his thumb stroking her cheek. I can give you all the time in the world. He paused, then added, but Eleanor, I want you to know I'm attracted to you, very much. These past 2 weeks have been difficult, watching you move around this house, seeing you with my daughters, wanting to touch you and holding back. So if I seem intense sometimes, it's not pressure, it's just you affect me more than I expected. The confession made Eleanor's pulse race. You affect me too, she admitted. Sometimes when you look at me, I feel, I don't know how to describe it. Warm, nervous, excited. Jacob's eyes darkened. That's desire, Eleanor, attraction. It's natural between a husband and wife. Eleanor swallowed hard. Would you kiss me again? Like you did at the ceremony, but maybe more? Jacob's breath caught. Are you sure? Yes. He lowered his head slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. When his lips met hers, it was gentle at first, exploratory. Then when Eleanor didn't pull away, he deepened the kiss, his mouth moving against hers with practiced skill. Eleanor had been kissed before, fumbling attempts by boys who didn't know what they were doing. This was nothing like that. Jacob kissed like a man who knew exactly what he wanted and how to get it, but who was holding himself in careful check for her sake. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. Eleanor's hands had somehow found their way to his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath her palms. We should stop, Jacob said, his voice strained. Before I forget my promises to take this slow. Eleanor nodded, though part of her didn't want to stop at all. Good night, Jacob. Good night, wife. The word sent a thrill through her. Sleep well? Eleanor retreated to her room, her lips still tingling from his kiss, her body humming with unfamiliar sensations. She changed into her nightgown, climbed into bed and lay awake for a long time, listening to the storm outside and thinking about the man sleeping just down the hall, her husband. The word still felt strange, but also right. She was Mrs. Jacob Thornton now, mother to Sarah and Emma, mistress of this ranch. It was more than she'd ever dared to dream, and she was determined to prove herself worthy of it. The storm raged for 3 days, dumping snow until the drifts reached the bottom of the windows. The family was confined to the house, but rather than feeling trapped, Eleanor found herself enjoying the enforced intimacy. She taught the girls to make cookies, read to them for hours, helped Sarah with her letters and numbers. Jacob brought his ranch ledgers to the kitchen table, working on accounts while Eleanor cooked, the girls playing nearby. It felt domestic, comfortable, like they'd been a family for years rather than days. On the 3rd night after the girls were in bed, Eleanor found Jacob standing at the window, staring out at the snow-covered landscape. "It's beautiful," she said, coming to stand beside him. "It is." Jacob's voice was thoughtful, "but it's also isolating. We won't be able to get to town for weeks, maybe months. Are you all right with that? Being stuck here with just us?" Eleanor considered the question seriously. A month ago, the thought of being isolated would have terrified her. Now, looking at the home she'd helped create, thinking of the girls sleeping upstairs, and the man beside her, she felt nothing but contentment. "I'm more than all right with it," she said honestly. "This feels like where I'm supposed to be." Jacob turned to look at her, his expression intense. "You're remarkable, you know that? 2 weeks ago you were a stranger. Now I can't imagine this house without you." "Jacob," Eleanor whispered, her heart racing. He reached out, pulling her gently into his arms. Eleanor went willingly, resting her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. They stood like that for a long time, simply holding each other, finding comfort in the contact. "I know we said we'd take this slow," Jacob murmured into her hair, "but I need you to know what I feel for you. It's already more than just partnership. I care about you, Eleanor, as a person, as a woman, not just as someone helping with my daughters." Eleanor tilted her head back to look at him. "I feel the same way. It's happening faster than I expected, but I can't deny it. When I'm with you, I feel safe, wanted, like I matter. You do matter." Jacob's hand came up to cup her face. "You matter more than you know." He kissed her then, deeper than before, with less restraint. Eleanor responded, her body pressing against his, her hands fisting in his shirt. The kiss grew heated, Jacob's hands sliding down to her waist, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jacob rested his forehead against hers. "Eleanor, I want you, but I won't rush you. When we take that step, I want you to be ready, to want it as much as I do." Eleanor's body was thrumming with sensations she'd never experienced before. "I want you too," she admitted, "but I'm nervous. I don't know what to do. How to please you." Jacob's eyes softened. "You please me just by being here, by being you. When the time comes, we'll figure it out together. I'll show you, teach you. There's no pressure to be anything other than yourself." Eleanor nodded, touched by his patience, his understanding. "Thank you for being so kind, so gentle with me." "It's not kindness, Eleanor. It's respect. You deserve to be cherished, not just used." Jacob pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "Now, we should both get some sleep. Tomorrow I need to dig out the barn, make sure the stock has enough feed." "I'll make you a big breakfast," Eleanor promised, "to keep your strength up." Jacob smiled, a real warm smile that transformed his face. "I'm a lucky man, Mrs. Thornton, and I'm a lucky woman, Mr. Thornton." They parted at the top of the stairs, each going to their separate rooms. But as Eleanor settled into bed, she found herself wishing just a little that they'd both gone into the same room instead. The weeks that followed settled into a comfortable rhythm. Jacob worked the ranch, Eleanor managed the house and cared for the girls. They grew closer each day, stealing kisses in the kitchen, holding hands on the porch in the evenings, sharing quiet conversations after the children were asleep. Sarah began calling Eleanor Mama Eleanor, a compromise that honored her birth mother while accepting Eleanor's place in her life. Emma simply called her Mama, attaching herself to Eleanor with the innocent trust of a child who'd been given what she desperately needed. And Eleanor found herself falling in love, not the passionate, overwhelming love of fairy tales, but something deeper, more solid. Love built on respect and partnership, on shared goals and quiet moments. Love that grew stronger each day. One night, about 2 months after their wedding, Eleanor made a decision. She'd been thinking about it for weeks, working up her courage. After the girls were asleep, she found Jacob in the parlor, reading by lamplight. "Jacob," she said softly, "could I talk to you?" He immediately set down his book. giving her his full attention. "Of course, what's on your mind?" Eleanor sat beside him on the sofa, her hands folded in her lap. "I've been thinking about us, about our marriage." Jacob's expression grew cautious. "All right, we've been married for 2 months now, and in that time, I've come to care for you very deeply. You're a good man, a wonderful father, and you've been incredibly patient with me." "Eleanor, there's no rush." "I know," she interrupted gently, "but I don't want to wait anymore. I want to be your wife in every way. I'm ready, Jacob. I want to share your bed, to be truly married." Jacob's eyes darkened with desire, but his voice remained controlled. "Are you absolutely certain? There's no going back once we cross that line." "I'm certain." Eleanor reached out, taking his hand. "I trust you. I want this. I want you." Jacob stood, pulling her up with him. "Then come with me." He led her to his bedroom, larger than hers, with a big bed and windows overlooking the ranch. Eleanor's heart was pounding, but it was excitement rather than fear. Jacob turned to face her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "We'll go slow. If anything hurts or frightens you, you tell me immediately. This is about both of us, about pleasure and connection, not just physical release. Do you understand?" Eleanor nodded, too nervous to speak. Jacob began unlacing her dress with practiced fingers, his movements slow and deliberate. "You're trembling," he murmured. "Are you cold?" "No, just anticipating." "Good anticipation or bad?" "Good," Eleanor breathed. "Definitely good." Jacob smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple as he slid the dress from her shoulders. "Then let me show you, wife, just how good it can be." What followed was a revelation. Jacob was patient and thorough, taking his time to explore her body, to teach her what pleased him, to discover what made her gasp and arch into his touch. There was pain, briefly, as he'd warned there would be, but it was quickly overshadowed by pleasure, by the intimacy of being joined with him, by the overwhelming sense of rightness. Afterward, Eleanor lay in Jacob's arms, her head on his chest, feeling thoroughly loved and cherished. "Are you all right?" Jacob asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "I'm better than all right," Eleanor said honestly. "I'm happy." Jacob tightened his arms around her. "Good, because I plan on making you happy like this as often as you'll let me." Eleanor laughed, the sound free and joyous. "I think I can manage that." They fell asleep, tangled together, and when Eleanor woke the next morning in Jacob's bed, sunlight streaming through the windows, she knew she'd finally found her home. The months turned into a year, then 2. Eleanor settled completely into her role as wife and mother, transforming the ranch house into a true home. She planted a garden in the spring, sewed curtains for every window, filled the walls with warmth and life. Sarah grew into a confident young woman, her early wariness of Eleanor long forgotten. She was top of her class when the school teacher finally came to the area, and she rode like she was born in the saddle, making her father proud. Emma bloomed under Eleanor's care, losing the quiet sadness that had haunted her eyes. She was bright and cheerful, always singing, always helping, the joy of the household. And Jacob, he became more than Eleanor's husband. He became her partner, her lover, her best friend. They worked side by side to build their ranch, to raise their daughters, to create a life that was rich in all the ways that mattered. On their second wedding anniversary, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. She told Jacob that night, in the privacy of their bedroom, and watched his face transform with wonder and joy. "A baby," he whispered, his large hand splaying over her still flat stomach. "We're having a baby." "We are." Eleanor covered his hand with hers. "Are you happy?" "Happy." Jacob pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Eleanor, you've given me everything. A home, a family, a reason to believe in second chances. This baby is just another gift, another blessing I don't deserve but will thank God for every day." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you, Jacob. I don't think I've ever said it out loud, but I do. I love you so much." "I love you too, Eleanor. From that first morning when you walked into the livery stable and chose to take a chance on us, I've been falling in love with you. You're the bravest, strongest, most incredible woman I've ever known." They kissed, tender and sweet, a promise of all the years to come. The baby, a boy they named Thomas, was born in the spring, strong and healthy, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. Sarah and Emma doted on their baby brother, fighting over who got to hold him, and Jacob walked around with a permanent smile on his face. Eleanor looked at her family, at the life she'd built from nothing, and marveled at how far she'd come. 2 years ago, she'd been packing her bags in silence, ready to run away from shame and failure. Now she had a husband who loved her, children who needed her, and a home that was truly hers. Sometimes in the evening, when the children were asleep and she and Jacob sat on the porch watching the sunset, Eleanor would remember that moment in the boarding house. The moment she'd decided to open the door instead of hiding behind it. The moment she'd chosen to take a chance on a stranger and an uncertain future. It had been the best decision of her life. "What are you thinking about?" Jacob asked one such evening, noting her distant expression. Eleanor smiled, leaning into his warmth. "Just how lucky I am. How lucky we all are." Jacob pressed a kiss to her hair. "Luck had nothing to do with it, Eleanor. You made this life happen through your courage, your hard work, your willingness to believe in something better. You saved us, all of us." "We saved each other," Eleanor corrected. "That's what family does." Jacob couldn't argue with that. He simply held his wife, watching their ranch lands spread out before them, counting his blessings and thanking whatever force had brought Eleanor Hayes into his life. In the house behind them, Sarah was helping Emma practice her letters, while baby Thomas slept in his cradle. The fire crackled in the hearth, dinner's dishes were washed and put away, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. It was ordinary, it was simple, it was everything Eleanor had ever dreamed of and more. And as the sun set over the Wyoming mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Eleanor Thornton knew that she was finally, truly home, not because of the house or the land, but because of the people who filled it with laughter and love. She had packed her bags in silence once, ready to disappear into a future that held nothing. But a cowboy had blocked her path, offering her an impossible choice and an uncertain future. And in choosing him, choosing them, choosing to stay, Eleanor had found something she'd never expected. She'd found herself, she'd found love, she'd found home, and she would never ever pack those bags again.